Oh, yeah. So, hi everyone. Today I have someone very special to me, and this is like very personal because we actually never seen each other face to face. This is for the first time, and this is the incredible girl lady who actually edited my book, my first debut novel. This is Qat Wanders, and she is an author of 29. I don't know if you already complete the third yet or not yet.
It's done. It's being edited.
Okay. So, all right, let's say 30 books on Amazon under different names as well, which I want to ask later on. She is a writer, she's an editor, and she is also a fitness fanatic lately. So there's another topic. She used to be a circus acrobat, so very interesting life. And she has an amazing daughter who is an author herself. So congratulations, Kat. I want to thank you for being with me. I want to thank you for all the work you did with my book. We will get to this later, but my first question, I have a list. My first question is this. There was a moment, well, let's start, let's go back in time. When I was writing my novel, from the very beginning, and mind you, it was like 5 manuscripts and then again, corrections and corrections, but I always felt like I want to publish this traditional way. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna sign this amazing contract, like, hey. And then literally this year in January, I just said, you know what, this is not worth it. Like, I'm not gonna go with the traditional publishing. I'm gonna self-publish because I have more control over the cover, over the title, also more leverage with the markets. And my first question to you is, Cut this, because you have experience, like really good experience working for the traditional publishing house. I don't exactly remember which one. So what would you say nowadays is the way to go? Self-publishing is better or traditional? And do you think that traditional still will exist or soon is completely over?
I think traditional will always exist, honestly, because there's still the prestige that comes with it. You'll always have the big five, like Random House, and you'll always have those. But I think self-publishing is far superior from a money standpoint. Now, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. If what you're trying to do is just have that New York Times bestseller next to your name, then I can see where traditional publishing is important. I do know a lot of very successful entrepreneurs who have done the traditional route once and then self-published all their other books, because traditional route gets them that, that title, and then the self-published books make them all their money because you're not making pennies on the dollar. The publishing house usually takes most of it. There are more publishing companies coming out nowadays that only take 50%, or in some cases only 30%. They're usually like hybrid publishers. They're a little different, but they are coming into existence more. And that's usually where I would send someone looking to go the traditional route, unless you have a huge platform and you are positive you can sell 10,000 copies that first week, 100,000 copies over. Like, if you have a huge platform, then you can do it and it can be really worthwhile. But if you just want to make money on your writing, self-publishing is the way to go.
But there is not much saying as far as author, isn't it true? Like, when you deal with those publishing houses, they pretty much decide for every other aspect of the book, correct?
Yeah, that you're basically selling them your soul. They will decide the cover, they can change your title, they can remove half of the content of your book. There's a really like fantastic example. I probably shouldn't actually name him, so I won't, but he did this really amazing series of books that became very popular, and I actually met him in Oregon, but it was like his spiritual journey, and he was channeling, it was things like that. It was a very specific subject with a specific audience. And because they wanted to take a more Christian perspective from it, they completely changed the title and called what he was channeling, they called it God. And it was just like, by changing that one word, it was open to a different audience. But here he has this this message that got out to a totally different audience than it probably would have otherwise. So there is good and bad to that. Like they knew they were able to sell him to people who wouldn't have otherwise found him, but at the same time, his entire message was compromised. So it just depends on what you're trying to do.
Pretty much like twisted it because it went to a different audience with that. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So
an audience they knew would sell, like, because the Christian audience is huge. It's one of the biggest, like maybe even the, I don't think it's the biggest in sales, but I mean, that's a huge, faith-based books are huge. Everyone wants to read in that genre, or not everyone, but like a huge majority want to read in that genre. So
you know, it's great because now I kind of like I get inspired to the next question. It's not even on my list, but you know what, Kat, I want to ask you. When I was writing my story, and you, I mean, I feel like you really know me because you were polishing this story, and you haven't, this was the most beautiful thing because you are so efficient and so quick and so sharp the way you work, and I could literally feel it before I even contacted you. That's why I chosen you, because I say this like you had this paw, like a paw, like animal has, like you're just sharp, you like click it and you know it. And when you were working through my story, you know, when I wrote this, I didn't write this checking what genre is a currently popular genre. I just knew that what I can write is what I have experienced so far. And my question is to you, do you think for people who are writing now, would you say they have to look what is popular, or they just should express themselves as the most authentic and genuine, whatever comes out?
I think once again, it depends on what you want to do. Like if you just need to get your story out, just do it. You can always write to market later. I do both, honestly. Like my one book, Searching for Venus, it was 3, now it's 1 book that I squished together. That was literally just a cathartic experience for me. It was for me, and it's still my least selling book of all, and that's fine. Because the people who do read it, they say it changes their lives, and then they come back to me and it's great, the feedback's wonderful. But then others are just, it just, yeah, it depends on what you want to do. Sometimes you can be lucky and hit both, and that's great. One of my yoga books did that. It was something I was very passionate about, but it also just kind of hit a vein in the publishing world, and it just did really well, specifically because it was to a very niche audience. Mm-hmm. So it depends. And your book is the most unique book I think I've ever edited. It was definitely an interesting experience because your style is so, I don't even know how to explain it. Just so unique, like in a good way too, but it's something that I think you really have to jive with your editor for. I can only imagine what some other editors might have done to it. Yeah, when it's your soul speaking, especially for your first book, I don't really see anything wrong with that because you can always write to market later and you just kind of get your heart out there on paper.
So was it hard for you to edit my book?
No, not at all. It was, I'm really, as far as editors go, I tend to be fairly light-handed because I really like to preserve someone's voice. It also depends on what the person wants. I've had some people write, say, like a business book or a self-help book, and like they weren't native English speakers, or they just had a really unique voice, and they said they want it to sound as professional as possible. And if that's the case, then they will frequently find me, quote unquote, butchering their book, because to make it sound like it's traditionally published, I have to completely rewrite almost every sentence. Wow. And since yours wasn't a technical book, your voice was able to shine through. And just because your voice was so unique, like you used a lot of ellipses, and like I could almost hear you talking, and I had never actually heard you speak. Well, no, we talked on the phone, didn't we?
No, never. No? This is literally the first.
I just feel like I have.
No, and this is so special to me because I felt like you're like so close to me, but we never seen each other or even heard each other. No, we never.
I feel like I could just hear your voice.
Wow, so. That's like, so like you are literally reading the energy from my book, I guess, because
Yeah, it was like the trailing sentences where you would give like a little piece of something and then move on to something else and then come back to it and then finish the thought toward the end, or the I don't know, just the sentence structure. Your book read more like a poem.
Yeah,
So
someone told me this actually, but I want to ask you this, like, what was the most interesting for you in my book? Was there something that you were like, and actually on that note, when a client approaches you, I know now you work a little differently with your editing business, I will mention this later, but let's say, can you tell Qat from the very beginning, when you get the manuscript, like, this book will be successful, or you cannot tell? You cannot. Okay.
I can't actually, because I've been so wrong in the past. There have been books I have seen that I thought, this sounds so terrible, but I've honestly thought to myself, well, this person is honestly illiterate and I can't imagine this book helping anyone. And then it explodes in popularity. So it really, I don't know. Honestly, when it comes down to it, I think it's marketing. And then every once in a while it's luck. Like with my yoga book, it was,
that was the first
yes,
one, right? Qat, the first one.
Yeah, well, actually, both of them did really well. The first one did really well for about a year and a half. And now I stopped advertising it. Like, it just stopped selling. I'd say the only copies it sells, maybe like a dozen a month, only because they read my yoga and chronic pain book, and then they buy the first one. So that one was just popular at that time. So that's another thing. There's also trends, but it also has a lot to do with just how good of a marketer the author is, and also not just how big their platform is, but how loved they are by their platform.
Okay.
So I had a guy who does like lead generation coaching, and his book was great, actually. It was a really great book. But I remember thinking, I wonder how he's going to get this out there, because it's going to look just like all the other like real estate books out there. And it wasn't just real estate and lead generation. It was like a workbook, almost like the Miracle Morning, but in a workbook style.
Mm-hmm.
And it was unique, but he attacked his audience with that book, and it was very well received. And then there's been others where I thought the book was unbelievably amazing, and it flopped, which is so sad, because like if the right people read it, their lives would be changed. So,
you know, it's interesting you said this, because that's how I actually feel will be my story going on forward. I feel like what I really from my heart I want to build a sense of community and a group of people who really get to know me. And, you know, this first book is really the beginning for me. So I might not have, I didn't have anyone really, no audience. So I'm literally now like introducing myself, my energy to people. And I think as I go on, then I will create this sense of, you know, like a group, like a team, like my readers, and then maybe like events to meet somewhere in south of France, you know, or something. But
sure.
But what was it like when you were reading my manuscript, or if we finished the story, what stood out for you the most as far in the story itself? Do you remember or no?
Oh, I remember it very well. And I can't always say that. I'd say, well, your sales experience was really interesting to me. Like, so coming over, and then
was it Abraham Hicks? Was it Abraham Hicks or no?
That was going to be the next thing I was going to say, is your introduction into the law of attraction, because it took such a turn that I wasn't expecting. And it was like all of your spiritual experiences, and then like, boom, law of attraction. I was like, oh, this is interesting, because it's a subject that, depending on the reader, it tackles a lot of different spiritual areas that some might not be comfortable with in each of them. And I have a book that does something very similar, because, you know, I studied in India and I studied Buddhism. I was, you know, raised very orthodox, like very different things from one to the other. And whereas some would resonate with parts, they might be offended by others. So that part, but then also the usual love stories you see in there, how you bounced, and because each time a lover was introduced into the book, it's like, oh, this is the one, and then you're gone. Okay, but this is the one, and then
I was hoping. with each one, but no case. Huh?
Yep. And it was just so real and raw. And it doesn't, the thing though is what surprises me is it doesn't follow the hero's journey at all, because it's your story and our lives don't do that. But even so, it's still read in a really fluid manner, which is unusual. A lot of people's personal stories you have to leave a lot of things out, but yours was literally just like a compilation of interesting adventures, and one led to the next. And then by the end of it, there was resolution, but it wasn't the resolution that anyone would have been expecting. But I don't want to give away the ending because
yeah, it's, yeah, I know that, when I finished it, I thought maybe this is too much about my relationships. I had this moment, I was like, well, that was my life. Like, it was literally like a telenovela, really.
Mm-hmm. And that's what people want,
yeah.
though. I think you have to express that part because, the best selling books in the whole world are romances. There's a reason for that.
Because we are looking for happy endings. I think that's what it is. Kat, I want to ask you this. When someone is, because I tell you why I've chosen you. There was one interview I found on YouTube, like you were sharing your story, and it really touched my heart because I was in a to some extent similar position. That was your very beautiful relationship with your father. And I would like you to talk about it because this is very important. Why I think it is. Now is the time when a lot of illusions that people were living it for a very long time, the programming, the spells, the mindsets is falling apart. The truth is going to be revealed and people will finally wake up and say, you know what, this is not the job I want to do. This is not the relationship I want to be in. Maybe I want to be a writer and maybe I want to publish books and write my books. So maybe this conversation will inspire someone to finally grab this pen or this computer and start putting their soul and their energy and their feelings into the book. So tell me, please, about that moment when you were talking to your father and you decided to start with this first book, because that was very important when I was listening to it.
So there's kind of two different stories. When it goes, and I will get to that pretty quickly, but like it goes back to, I think I was 7 years old and I had just written, and I mean wrote like with a pen and paper and illustrated this box set of books. And I went running up to my dad like, Daddy, I'm an author. And he was like, oh, honey, I'm so proud of you. And he gave me $20 and told me, as he bought my book set from me, and told me that he would always be my first customer and my #1 fan when I was a rich and famous author. So that was like I literally just lost a button on my sweater. It just fell apart while I was talking.
So he's gone with us. That's a sign. That's a sign.
Indeed.
Wow.
So fast forward, like 30 some years later, and he always stayed really supportive of my writing journey because it was always, the cliche. I always knew I was going to be a writer and I wanted to go into publishing, and so I did. Like I went into editing, and that it was always my thing, and I always knew that I'd be involved in publishing somehow. But even getting involved in publishing, I still hadn't published, right, because I watched all these people get rejected. I mean, oh my goodness, I don't know what the percentage is, but I mean, it's very unusual.
Why to sidetrack for a moment, why do you think is this? Why so many rejections in those publishing houses?
A lot of bad books out there, honestly.
Okay.
Most books aren't really very good. But then there's also that even the ones that are good, the publisher needs to know if they can sell it or not. So it really depends on what's trending and who they can sell it to. Okay. So yeah. So it has to be like a really special story. And what's interesting is it isn't a story that you necessarily want to stand out. It needs to blend in. So if you have this really unique story, that's great, but the publishers won't know how to sell it because there's no huge audience to sell it to.
Like mine, kind of, right?
Actually, just like yours, and a lot like one of mine too. Yeah. But that being said, all these years later, I had just kind of given up. I had this book I'd been working on. And so then I found self-publishing school. This was years later. I'd left the traditional publishing industry. I was editing on the side. I never thought I could be successful at it because it was just a side job. And so, you know, circus performing later.
That's
Renaissance
amazing. I
fairs.
mean, that is like, in itself, it's like a book.
Yeah, Renaissance fairs, circus, train hopping, hitchhiking, all kinds of crazy things. So all these years later, I found self-publishing school when I was trying to settle down to get custody of my daughter. And so I joined self-publishing school to try to get this book done that I'd been working on for years. That was my story, fiction, but it was my story. And so right after I joined, the self-publishing school motto is like, in 90 days, you can become a best-selling author. And so right after I joined to work on that book, my dad called me and told me he only had 3 months left to live. So here I am in this program to get a book done in 90 days. And so I was going to go out and stay with him. I did end up flying out there and staying with him until he passed. But when I was thinking that, he said, just get your books done. That's all I care about. I just want to hold your first book in my hands and I want to see my daughter become a best-selling author. I'm like, okay, great. That's a pretty tall order, Dad. But I mean, it lit a fire up under my butt and I went and did it. So I freaked out for a little bit and decided, okay, forget this other book I've been working on. I can write this book about yoga a lot faster because I know so much about it. So I did it. I finished it within the time frame. I made some pretty bad decisions of like publishing. I ended up hiring a hybrid company to like help do everything for me. I did a bunch of stuff I don't recommend,
Okay.
but I got the book done and I got it out there and I got the first copy into his hands a week before he died. So like he was my first customer. He was,
I love this.
yeah, as soon as it was available on Kindle, he had it on his Kindle immediately and he ordered the first paperback copy. He ordered a whole box of them and his wife got so mad.
What was your father's name, Qat? What was your father's name?
His name was Edward. But
oh,
yeah, it's funny because he ordered all these copies to give to his friends so he could have a book signing right there. But yeah, the book sat right next to him when he took his last breath a week later.
It's amazing.
So.
Do you feel him sometimes? Do you feel his energy around you?
Not as much now, honestly, but for a long time, yeah. It's hard to explain, but I think it's just every once in a while, yeah. But I think we've kind of moved on since then, because this was a little over 3 years ago, and it's been quite an adventure ever since. But there's so many things I do now that I'm just like, hope you're watching, because this is an adventure.
I'm sure he is. You know, look at this, like 3 months they say to self-publish, and then this was exactly this time frame that your father was given. I mean, no coincidences in the universe. It's incredible. Yeah. So,
and for the record, though, I do not recommend actually doing it in 3 months. Right. I know that there's a lot of companies that tout that, and I do not recommend that, especially for your first book. Like, I screwed up so much stuff with that first book. Like, the cover by the end of it was awful. It was badly edited, and it was a disaster. But I learned a lot in that process. So my second book was a lot better. And even now, I've actually republished all of those books that I had done that first year. Okay. And they've all been redone with better covers, better formatting, better editing. And especially as an editor, now I use my own team on my books instead of hiring out. I've learned my lesson. So it's really, you learn a lot in the process. And yes, once you really have it down to an art, you can lather, rinse, repeat, and just pump books out like crazy. But at the beginning, I don't recommend doing that. I recommend taking your time and making a high quality product so you don't look dumb.
Right. You know, I want to ask you actually about this, Qat. I've mentioned to you before we started recording that when it started, I wrote 5 books for children. It's a series. And it will be adventures of 5-year-old girl. Her name is Matilda, and her dog Odo, a beagle. And they travel in time and they meet the greatest men, like Coco Chanel, and very cool. I will send you the names later. But you know what I want to ask you? Because you write books under like different names, like different pen name, right? You say. So can you tell me, do you think I should change my name for those books, or I can still remain like Anya K?
I think you should stick with yours.
Okay.
And if you do, at least make sure it's a name that people can easily associate with you.
Okay.
So like I have pen names that I don't share with people because it's in a pretty specific series of genres that it's like I've kind of tapped into a niche there. But then I have, you know, Qat Wanders is my nonfiction work. Then my fiction work that I want people to know is me is just Katerina Wanders, my full name. So they're under two different profiles on Amazon, but it's pretty obvious it's the same person. So you could do something like that. But to be honest,
I feel like I want to change Kat. I feel like I still want to continue with my name, and then I have more people aware of this is me and this is the same me.
Yeah, I think if you have even the tiniest like string of a relationship between genres you're writing in, I say keep it all under the same name. So like my name right now, because Qat Wanders, that I have my yoga books and then the Searching for Venus book, which was kind of the memoir. I've also got editing books I'm working on, and then this unedited life series I'm working on. That'll all be under the same pen name. And yes, yoga and editing are not related at all. However, I need people to know it's me. And if someone following me on Amazon sees an editing book pop up, they don't have to buy it.
Okay.
But if you're, it's more important, for instance, if you're writing, like, I actually, oh, this is a little touchy, but I know someone who writes faith-based Christian devotionals, but also writes erotica. So, and so needless to say, she can't have those two names associated because someone found out she would lose her reputation, and I will definitely not name that person. It's still, every time I hear about that though, I just chuckle. Another thing is people who write books with a lot of adult content like violence or sex or something, but then they also write books for teenagers. They just don't want the teenagers or like children's books. They don't want the younger audience to find the adult books.
Yeah, I mean, this is like from two parts of the brain, literally, completely. Wow. Like the alter ego is wow. So Kat, what do you think about pre-selling books? Like when I put my on pre-sale before it was completed, do you think pre-selling on like on Amazon, is it important or is not?
That's up for a lot of debate. I do both. With nonfiction, well, I mean, I'm thinking about it with my next one. So, okay, here's the pros and cons, and I can't tell you which to do and which not to do. The pros are that you can start selling it in advance and like actually selling it, meaning people can literally go onto Amazon and pay the money.
Yeah.
The biggest con is not having it ready in time. Aside from like, even if you really think you have all your ducks in a row, I know people who have done everything right and then Amazon sent out the wrong link, or something happened on Amazon's side. And this has happened way too often for me to say it's not a legitimate concern. We're not talking like, I've heard this maybe one in 5,000. We're talking like maybe 1 in 30 people I know have this happen. And for a new author, especially, this is devastating to have happen, because not only do you lose all your pre-orders, you look dumb, and then you have to explain to your platform, hi, Amazon screwed this up. Usually they're very understanding when, especially when they know it's Amazon's mistake, people will rally to like promote your book more. I know people who have made more money because Amazon screwed up. So it just depends, but that's a little too scary and too much stress for me to want to deal with. I do occasionally, I have 2 fiction books up for pre-order right now, and that is solely because I wanted to plug them in the previous book. So I finished a book series, and then I plugged my next book series at the end of that one. So that means people who were fresh off of my first book series are like, oh, another series, and then they pre-order book 1. Another good thing to do is if you're writing a series, you can put the link at the end of your book for the next book. So that way they don't forget about you. And like, as soon as they finish your book, they pre-order the next one. And then you put the link for the next one and the next one, depending on how many are in your series. For a first book in a series, I don't necessarily recommend it, just because there's too many things that can go wrong. However, some people have a great like pre-sale page, and it just depends on
It
your
depends.
ability to sell.
So what would you say now? Because now, this book will be entirely cut illustrated, the one I finished now for children, and it's 5 of them. So it's like a set, literally. It's a series, but it's a set. So if someone writes, like from the beginning, they know they will write more than one book, like I did. Like I have 5, but it has to start with 1. Do you think it's wise to present it from the beginning? This will be the series.
Mm-hmm. I do.
And then you wait when you have all of them, or you just sell one by one, and then you have another combination of all of those books together.
There's also some debate about this. There's debate about everything.
Yeah.
But so as far as like a pre-order standpoint, I know that wasn't your question, but from a pre-order standpoint for that, I would suggest not setting the first one up for pre-order, but having a link at the end of each to pre-order the next one. But maybe even not. So depending on how long you're going to wait in between books, the reason I like the rapid release schedule is because your readers are immediately satisfied. So you say, hey, here's the end of the book, pre-order the next one, and then they get it in like 2 weeks or something, and it keeps them fresh in your series. Most authors don't do that though. I see a lot of success even when they don't, and they wait months or sometimes years between books. My daughter is still working on book 2 of her 4-book series, and it's been almost 2 years now.
Wow.
Her readers are still waiting patiently.
Amazing.
But let's be honest, she lost a lot of readers because of that. So we are basically going to have to start from ground zero on book 2, build up her audience again, get people excited, all because she's waited so long. So when you're doing that, the pros to that are that you get to build up buzz with each book, but you lose the buzz from the first book and you have to build it up all over again. So I don't recommend waiting too long between books. So if you think it's going to take you 6 months per book, I would maybe recommend waiting until they're all done. The biggest issue with that is if the first book doesn't, let me preface this by saying I don't agree with this, but I'm going to explain why a lot of people say this, but I actually don't agree. A lot of people say there's no point in writing a whole series if it's not going to sell. And you don't know if it's going to sell until you write the first book. I don't actually agree with that, because I think that book would sell a lot better the first book would sell a lot better if people know more books are coming right away.
I agree.
Personally, as an avid reader, yeah. I only look for finished book series. So, and I know a lot of readers get really mad when I say that, but it's true. I won't read a book until I know there's a finished series. So even if the books aren't published yet, if I go onto an author page and I see book 1 is published, none of the others are, but they're all up for pre-order, and I know they're coming, I will actually go through and order the whole series. I always do that. And so there, boom, the author just sold.
Yep.
They wrote 15 books. The author just sold them all because I buy them all at once. And I'm not the only one who does that. So a lot of people really want to see a whole series, and they also see a series and think, oh, this is a full series, therefore it's going to be that good, I'm going to invest. So I personally like the rapid release schedule better.
So now, and again, will be many opinions about it, but when I was going through this process, like when I decided for self-publishing and I was learning this, what is the most important for someone who self-publish is the cover, is the title. In my opinion, before I even saw that this is the most important, in my opinion, was the story. Because I always thought that if the story is captivating and if there is a flow to it, that is the most important aspect. But with Amazon and with the readers now, I see what they really focus on clicking on this book and deciding, besides, of course, if the person, they know the name of the author and this is this and this, so like the attention is really the cover and the title. I mean the cover, the title, the cover, and then the story. So do you agree with this, Qat, or you think it is, huh? Yeah.
I do. There's exceptions, of course. I read plenty of books with horrible covers. but but I do judge a book by its cover. I will buy a book usually in paperback because I like the cover. I might never read the book or I might read some of it and think, oh, this turned out to be really boring, but it's so pretty. And I set it on my shelf. However, I do buy books with bad covers when I know the author. There's a few authors I actually really, really love, and I won't, again, name names because I don't like their covers, but I know the books are going to be so good, it doesn't matter, but I never buy them in paperback because the cover's ugly. I only read them on my Kindle. So, and if I'm searching on Amazon, I will not buy a book with a bad cover or an unprofessional looking cover because I have no reason, if I don't know the author, because I have no reason to think, well, it'll probably still be a good story if they don't know what they're doing with the cover. So I do agree. That cover is so important, and it's what's going to get their attention at first. But then if you have a bad story, you're just going to get a bunch of bad reviews. Yeah. So that's not, like, I think the story is equally as important as the cover, but I think the cover is going to be, the cover will make or break whether the person buys it or not. The story will make or break the review. And if you get a bunch of bad reviews, you're not going to sell books anyway. So they're equally important. It's just in order of what the reader sees.
So I want to ask you, because you mentioned this, and I'm very grateful that you said this, because I had the moments of thinking about it myself. So you said that you would be curious, or you would be wondering how my book will sell if the cover would be different. And you know, like, you really know, like, there are not many people, only those who read the book and you know why the cover is like this, okay? Like, why there is an angel here and there is a forest, because the first chapter really starts like this. So this is the introduction. But if you would publish this book now and you will say, okay, Anya, do this cover, what would you think would be the best cover for this book?
I've thought on that a lot for years, because book marketing is not necessarily my forte. I'm always hesitant to give initial cover advice. However, once I see a book cover, I can usually give really good advice for like making changes, but only minor changes. I usually have to, like, I go to 100 covers for everything. They're ridiculously cheap for the quality you get to, but they know book marketing. So like, they will research a genre that you're trying to be competitive in, and then boom, like, here's a book that will stand out in that genre. And then once I see their first draft, I can say, oh yes, okay, now this color, and then move this over here, and then boom, perfect cover. But I don't have enough right brain in that area to necessarily help with something. It would require, well, I was going to say it would require research in the genre, but I don't even do that. I trust my cover designer at this point. And now that I know my genres enough, I can tell what works really well. But since I don't know everyone else's genres as well, it's a tough one. And for you specifically, like, you would have to decide, are you trying to be more competitive in the spirituality genre or the memoir genre? Right. And that being said, because I have a book in both as well, and I know a lot of people, books like, oh, what's it called? The Alchemist, or
yes, exactly. And there is, and actually I even wrote about The Alchemist. I mentioned.
Yeah, books like that. Yeah. I based my cover. Initially, I went full-blown fiction, and it sold, but to the wrong people. So all these people are reading my books like, well, this isn't a very happy ending. I'm like, well, it was the real ending. So then I realized I actually needed to make it clearer that it was a true story. So then I had the cover redone. It looks completely different. And it did change the sales, because then it was getting in the hands of the right people and they understood what it was. So yeah, it has to be attention grabbing, and then like,
you know what just came to me when you were saying this, and thank you so much for this. I know it came to me. It came an image, funny, because the cover now is the cover from the first chapter, and it came to me the image from the last chapter. Like, it literally, I saw like a scene of the location, and then like maybe like me, but from behind. So
I was actually just about to say, have you considered putting yourself on the cover? A lot of publishing gurus say not to do that unless you have a big platform. But at the same time, when it's your story, like, now I wish I'd brought it in here, but no, I don't have it close by.
I'm on the back, like here, okay? But yeah. But honestly, I felt like I could have the last chapter, the image of the place the last chapter talks about, and then like image of me. But you know, Kat, I want to ask you, and this will be actually my last question for you. Your daughter, you just mentioned she she published one book. I want to ask you this because there can be a child now who actually wants to express herself or himself and create like this cute first book, you know, and that self-publishing is actually great for this. I mean, how kids can go about it, like if they want to write a book the same way like the adults do? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wrote about this on my blog because so many people were asking me how she did it, because hers is no joke. It's a 365 page fantasy novel. So it's not like, I think it was like 75,000 words or something. It was not short, and it was very well plotted out, but she had a lot of help. Like we sat down.
The story.
Yeah, it was all her,
yeah.
yeah, it was all her concept, but it was definitely, she would not have been able to do that by herself. She was 8 when we started this. So she's 11 now.
Wow.
She was, by the time it got published, she was 10, but it was a long process. And I wrote a whole article about this because people were so confused about it. Like, how did she write this? I'm like, well, it's not like she just did it herself and published it. I mean, she had me and a whole team of professional editors. I helped her outline and plot it. We did a lot of revisions with the whole story. Then there was editing. We hired a professional illustrator to do who created her characters for the cover. All 4 covers are designed, a professional cover designer. I mean, it was a process and it took over a year. So it wasn't.
This is incredible, like for the first book to really have so much of the story and volume. I mean, she chosen you as a mother, so it's like, you know, because if the child just wants to write like 10 pages, 14 pages book about like a little squirrel somewhere, you know.
And lots of children have done that, actually. I've edited several books written by children now because they hear about my daughter Aura and then they come to me. And so I've written, I think it was like 500 words. It was going to be a picture book. I can't wait to see how it gets illustrated.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then I've written other like short little novels that you can tell. I usually have to ask the parents, depending on the age, but because I edited a like 60,000 word fantasy novel for a 15-year-old girl too. That was quite good. Like, wow. But usually I have to ask the parents, like, how heavy-handed do you want me to be? When it's just like a picture book, I usually leave it pretty much in the child's words. Mm-hmm. But then I explain to them like, okay, so my daughter wrote this and we completely changed, we transformed the book, like her voice changed, everything, like with her approval, but everything changed. We changed characters in some cases. So I have to ask the parents, like, how heavy-handed do you want me to be? How professional do you want this final product to be versus how much do you want it to be your child's raw, authentic voice? And I'm fine with either answer. I just need to know what they're trying to do with the book, because people are pretty lenient when they know like a little girl wrote this book. Right. They're not as offended by maybe like there isn't enough character development or they explain clothing too much. The people will be forgiving, but at the same time, like with my daughter, we didn't want that. So she would spend pages explaining every single outfit and the character's hair and makeup. And I'm like, honey, we have to take a lot of this out. We ended up cutting like 30,000 words after she was done, because she had over-explained so much. And so, but we talked about it because she is really interested in writing as a career down the road. So like, I need to understand, this is going to help you develop as a writer as you get older. So like long rambling sentences are fine, but they're not really. Like it's
wow, that's amazing. She'll be an author. Wow, I love this. Yeah, I love this. You know, you just said this because I think for me, when I was writing, and I tell you why. I never really liked the books that had too much description. Like they were losing me through those, like the tree, and then it's like every single leaf is described. I'm like, okay, let's get over it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I don't like it. I mean, I think it's kind of like Hemingway writing in a way. Not many words, but kind of to the point, describe enough so you can feel it and you still tell the story. And I don't know, maybe it's not objective because it's subjective, because I talk about my book, but I feel in my book it's not too much going around. I just kind of say it, or I present enough of description that people can paint this image. And
Exactly.
right, because I don't like it. I don't like when people like over describe and on and on and on and on, and it's like it's so boring, and it's just there's no flow. Like you stop the flow, like literally.
Yeah. Some people do. I don't. That's why I'm a fan of YA books, specifically young adult books, because they're usually very fast paced because they know they need to keep your attention. But I'm reading a zombie apocalypse series right now. Great story, but I feel like each book could have been a third of the length, because by the time I'm done, I'm like, wow, I know every single thing this character is thinking, and I feel like I really know this character. But then I read the reviews, and some of the reviews say way too long-winded, but most of the reviews, people really like that. So it's like, find your readers, hold on to them, and don't change your style if you want to keep attracting the same readers.
Right. So Kat, tell me now, when people want to find you, because you actually, how many years ago you started this editing business? Was it a long time ago?
2016 is
Okay.
when I went full time with it, and before that, I was just doing it on the side, so it wasn't like a real business. It was.
But now you have people working for you, and it's how many people now, you said?
15. I have a team.
Okay. So if someone wants to hire professional editor, because this is crucial, really, and like I said when I finished my book, I said I don't want to mention my editor's name. I said to you, because if I overlook something and I made mistake, it was my fault. So I don't want people to like say, oh, this person is a bad editor, because I think I was so excited to finally finish this, like 6 years, like let's finish finally, right? That's why I didn't mention you, because I felt if I make mistake, it will be under you, but it's not true, because that could be totally my fault. But if someone wants to find Kat's, what was it? Wandering Words Media, right?
wanderingwordsmedia.com.
Yeah.
With your book, if I remember correctly, it's just because you didn't get proofreading at the end. And that's usually, people confuse editing and proofreading all the time. Like if they find typos in someone's book, they're like, oh, there was no editor. Well, there probably was an editor, but by the time the person's done spending all this money on editing, it's very common for people not to get a proofreader afterward. And so that's when, and typos always slip through. Any editor, no matter how amazing you are, is going to leave typos behind. Honestly, a lot of times even proofreaders leave typos behind, but because the editing process is so involved and you're making so many changes, you have to have a proofreader afterward, even if it's a friend or the author herself. Like I have my my beta readers and my launch team proofread for me. I actually, this is a secret, it's not a secret anymore. I don't hire a proofreader for my own books. I edit them myself, then I send them to my editor, then I edit it again, and then I publish it. I take the print copy of the book with a red pen and I sit there and I find typos, and then I start promoting it after I'm confident it's typo free. But then I still tell my launch team, hey, please let me know if you find a typo, and every single time there's always at least like 5 to 10 that still slip through even after all that. So it's, but you find me one traditionally published book that doesn't have a few typos because I don't believe they're out there. Every book I read, I do find typos. So
if someone needs a great editor, and they can contact your people. Contact your people on your website, right? And how long does it take usually? Depends on the book, but would you say, like, you have so many different people working for you, would you say like 4 months, 5 months?
Honestly, we average about 1 week per 20,000 words turnaround. The issue is because I use a different editor for each type of genre because I have different specialists. The only tricky part is when we get a book that is already, there's already several others in that genre, so that particular specialist is booked up, then there might be a little bit of a wait. But usually we turn around 1 week per 20,000 words, unless it's like a heavy duty editing round, and then it can take like a week per 10,000 words even. So it just depends, and it depends on the queue and how many people are in it. And
Kat, you know, I'll ask you the payments. You have like, if someone cannot afford all this amount at once, do you have like payment plan for people?
We can, it depends. It depends on the person and their situation. We can usually work different things out. I'm good at getting creative because I like helping, especially first-time authors.
Okay. And actually, you know what I want to tell you? I forgot to mention, and this is very important because I get so much information through all this situation from this lockdowns and everything, and I get so much insight that I decided to donate 50% of sales to victims of children and human trafficking from my book. Because I just felt it so, I didn't know about this before, not to extent like I know now. And you know, who knows? I hope one day it will really sell more and then I can help. I'm helping whatever I sell, half of it goes, you know. I
Yeah.
found a place. I think it's good to help. It's good to help, even if it's not a lot. It's still good. Kat, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that I actually was finally able to meet you, and that you touched my book.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I'm really grateful. And it's so important to have the right editor. It's really, really, it's like a movie almost, because if you have a great images and the one who puts the movie together doesn't put it the right way, it doesn't matter. It's the same with the book. It's just with the words. And I'm glad because you actually know a lot of things that I know. So like the Abraham Hicks and Jack Canfield and, you know, angels and channeling. So it kind of unfolded throughout the work we did together.
Yeah, I always say a bored editor is a sloppy editor. So it's really important to find someone who actually likes what you're writing.
And your books, the easiest way to find is just when people put Qat Wanders in search on Amazon.
Yeah, you can also go to my website. They're all listed there.
I will put below everything so they can just click on it. Thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are. So I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to meet you for real.
Yeah, me too. And thanks for having me.